Yo, how's it going, folks? Welcome to episode 160 of the Simpa Life Podcast. I knew what episode we were on there. I didn't have to look at my notes. Hope you had a wonderful week. Hope you've been enjoying the slightly brighter weather, the slightly, I suppose, warmer, if not wetter weather. We've had some storms and shit. But yeah, if the worst that's happened is your wheelie bin's gone missing and your fence is down, then I suppose it's not really the worst situation that could happen. It's good for fences and insurers and keeps our economy going, apparently. Capitalist swine. We are 2 minutes in, and already I'm giving away my political inclinations to any new audience members here. That's got to be a record. Um, I'm a bit out of kilter here because I've just been talking to our guest for, I think, the better part of an hour now about various things, most of which we will discuss in the upcoming episode, several of which, for legal reasons, we probably can't discuss, so we shan't. But yeah, let's move on. In a week that has seen some good pardons, Leonard Peltier was pardoned finally by, I think Biden was the one who pardoned him, for the whole incident that happened 50 years ago with Native Americans and the FBI. So it's good to see that he's finally home, if not only for compassionate grounds, because he will die at home. Trump as well, being right as a broken clock is twice a day, released Ross Ulbricht, a promise that he had kept to the libertarian movement in America. Obviously, his connections with crypto is going to be quite interesting to watch and to see his involvement potentially with a future Trump government or any involvement in that sort of space. I mean, his pardon, as far as I'm aware, is full and unrestricted, so therefore there won't be any limitations on his practices. So he could really go into any field. So yeah, that's somebody to watch in the coming weeks, months, and years. Um, all right, we've got a lot to discuss, so let's jump over to introducing today's guest, who is back for the sixth time, maybe seven times. He basically lives here. I keep him in the cupboard. You can't tell if I open that door, he's actually out there. But no, he couldn't live in a cupboard. He does too much bloody hard work and is uncovering a lot that's gone on in the UK. So yeah, he needs to be out and about and doing his journalistic thing. So yeah, let's introduce today's guest, who is the founder of the UK-based cannabis consultancy agency, the Hemp Hound. He is the host of the Hemp Hound TV, although I don't think he's been able to produce many things on that recently because he's been so bloody busy with everything else that we're going to discuss shortly. And he is, of course, our unofficial CBD novel foods FBSA regulatory unofficial special correspondent. How are you doing, Kevin?
Unofficial. I mean,
I'm not paying
isn't
you.
there some certain number of times where you're on where you're kind of a little bit more than a guest star?
I think 10. If
I
we
don't
get
know.
you to
And,
10, yeah.
and by the way, in this cupboard, you need to feed me a little bit more bread and water, man. Come on, like, I pay enough rent.
I've just got another kit, and that's the issue with it. He's eating me out of house and home. Um, Well, yeah, excellent to have you back, brother. Excellent to have you back. Yeah, it's been sort of 6 months, just there over. Actually, it was June. What's the math on that? Probably closer to 8 months now, since we
Yeah.
last had you on. Obviously, a lot has happened in the UK since. It's difficult for most people to keep up with because it happens in such, obscure corners of the internet or in obscure publications or, very esoteric circles. So, can you kind of catch us up with what the hell has been happening? In different fields and areas in the UK.
Well, I mean, first of all, Labour's happened.
New government.
That's a big thing, and certainly there's an insane amount of parodies about their time in office that seem to go well outside of the realms of spit and image. If you want to giggle, do check out No Brainer with Angela Rayner on LinkedIn. It's hilarious. Jonathan Pye seems to be a little bit like back in his flow. He kind of went a little bit off during COVID, like on the jab days. But he's certainly providing interesting political commentary. In regards to the UK hemp and CBD industry, that's well, it's always interesting. I mean, never a dull moment in here. You guys who focus on medicinal and recreational cannabis, like you don't know how to party, like like the hemp and CBD industry parties. Yeah, interesting times we have seen in the last few, well, within the last. 6, 7 months, the authorization or the recommendation for the authorization for certain CBD products. They are from Canare Puris and the European Industrial Hemp Association. However, when true validation happens, who knows? It will spark a movement in the industry, no doubt. But equally, there's going to be the feeling that certain roadblocks are going to materialize. For example, one of them, which we'll be touching on one of the topics that we'll be talking about earlier, we've been waiting in the industry for the Home Office to potentially change the levels of controlled cannabinoids that can be consumed in hemp and CBD products. That came from recommendations from the Advisory Committee on the Misuse of Drugs. It was kind of hanging there over the progression of novel foods. The FSA themselves are seen in many documents saying novel foods will progress as soon as we get these changing of controlled cannabinoid levels. So what did the Home Office do? Waited a little bit, released a document without kind of telling anyone that it was still all about the 1 milligram rule, and there was no change. So for like the last 3 years, technically, the hemp and CBD industry has been living with an element of hope, thinking that they might be able to provide a little bit more of a full plant or whole plant product to the consumer in the UK, kind of reminiscent of what you can get in the EU and the US, only for the Home Office to go, no, we're going to have possibly one of the most restrictive hemp and CBD industries when it comes to controlled cannabinoids, and we'll most likely be working towards CBD only. All the rest is contaminants. So, yeah, like I said, you guys don't know how to party.
It's never ending, is it? Um, yeah, I suppose since we're here, we can adjust what we've kind of discussed there in terms of the order of things. I think yeah, the announcement that has then come out from the Home Office and the DEFRA, the Department of Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, it doesn't seem to do much of anything really. It seems like all it's doing is moving around the goalposts on the field. It's not really advancing the field. It's not inviting the players on. It's not starting the match or getting the crowd in. It's not actually doing anything to facilitate a game here. It just feels like more posturing for I don't know, the benefit of a certain few. Although they've kind of worded it as this is about bringing new people in and making it easier. We all know how pretty damn hard it is to get a license in the first place, a low THC cannabis cultivation license.
There,
So
there is a double-edged sword in regards to the recent updates. Now, first and foremost, what I was referring to with controlled cannabinoids just now, that and the update on farming regulations moving forward kind of ran in tandem. It might have been, important kind of, just put hemp and CBD companies as well as farmers who want to see a profit right by being able to use the whole plant in their place. You grow for the uncontrolled parts, seed and fiber. Past there, you need specialist license. They're not for people like you. Yeah, at the end of the day, last year, the Home Office had a public consultation process ongoing where they were going to talk about basically the devolution of power, certainly with hemp farming down to DEFRA. Now, with that document, we can see that DEFRA are included, but we can't really determine where the Home Office ends and DEFRA begins. They have eased up slightly on market or on license requirements. By all accounts now, or at least for the next growing season, it won't be about the field and you can't take it out of the field. It will be a license to the farm, which does give you an element of freedom when it comes to processing, certainly without a doubt. And there also seems to be less of a restriction on where you can grow. I mean, beforehand, there was a rigid restriction. It was about 1.5 miles away from built up areas or schools or anything like that. Any closer, you weren't going to get that. Then the Home Office kind of softened their approach and kind of gave a little bit of leeway dependent on, uh, environment, horizon, whatnot. Now they seem to be a little bit more willing. So that for the farmer to just grow. And that in itself is nice because there's a suggestion, but the hemp is being normalized again. And certainly the document does allude to the potential of more business coming from that way than there had been previously before. I think 2018, I think I saw a document that suggested there was only 39 farmers in the UK. I'd like to think that that's certainly coming up to 200 now. Certainly getting to a number where you would think there would have to be a change in guidance. The one thing that does kind of get me though, in that public consultation, they said, look, we're thinking about raising it to 0.3 to a percent THC. Now, this is important because anyone who goes on about climate change in the hemp and CBD industry, certainly a farmer, it will be because of changing conditions, meaning that it's harder to maintain that 0.2% THC because there's no guarantee that a 0.2% THC hemp strain will be 0.2% THC. It could have a lot more sunshine. There could be certain conditions outside of that increases that 0.2 to 0.121. Then if that's tested, it's not allowed to be used. And that's even the uncontrolled parts, the fiber, the seed, it's got to get burnt.
You got a phone near the computer, sorry.
Do I? I
Yeah.
I do,
That
but
was very nostalgic. It got like the feedback you used to get in the early noughties, when before your phone would ring and something go like it was
oh
grumbling
no.
on the audio there. That was cool.
That
Um,
I didn't hear it this side.
no, it was I think just 'cause my headphones are very what's the word? I'm very in there, very tuned into the sound right now. Uh, yeah, interesting, dude. Interesting. It. Again, maybe I am just a cynic. Maybe I am, if I was wearing my tinfoil hat, it feels that it's not about bringing new players in. It's about the players that we've got. Or yeah, you don't need to be in the field. You're licensed to the farm. That to me says hydroponic. That to me says potted. That to me says you're not growing for sticks and stems like in the traditional sense of compact as many plants as you can into the area. They go for a vertical gain, and then you have a small subset of heads at the top that can't be used because they're narcotic or classified there as narcotic, and then you've got more of the fibrous material. You wouldn't grow one of these like sort of cannabis indica cultivars or the drug type cultivars, really broad, bushy, that have then been crossed into, again, it all gets broken down, but into what we would consider hemp in the West by its THC percentage, because that wouldn't produce the materials that are processed in the way that their machinery is sort of designed for. So to me, it's either the first part of a road towards something like you said that I can't see them doing, frankly. And it feels that it's more that if we're seeing that CBD is becoming novel, as in what they're trying to do is get it down to an isolated product that is in a standing product that is then sold at such a low dose it's subtherapeutic. And anything that would then be therapeutic, you would have to get as a medical product. So basically, in my head, it's something like GW and British Sugar looking and going, how much land have we really got? If we were to own the whole market in the UK, how much land would we really need? Because again, if they're making it to just the isolate of one compound, but they're keeping it plant derived, the cultivars almost don't matter. As long as
Mm,
they keep, so what they would look for is even if you got to something, because there are separation processes to like you can wash out or you can separate through different chemical isolations. So you could grow something that's much higher in THC, which you've got the dangerous drug license. So if you have the hemp license to get the farm, as it were, then you then have the dangerous drug license to extract the flowers. And you just flip the script and go, well, fuck the fiber, switch it all onto flowers. And so you've gone the other way into the thing. And then what you're doing is extracting it to the pure product of the zero isolate and then putting that into the medical market. Because again, vape oil pens and stuff like that are exploding in the medical sector. I mean, the market's growing at like 10% a month, something like that. It was announced in August last year. Might have slowed down now, probably still increasing, to be honest with you. The more traffic it's getting, the more attention that it gets, especially in the media.
oh, my apologies there. I don't know. Hmm. I wonder if I've caught a dog hair from somewhere. Highly possible.
Oh,
It
strange.
could be. I mean, if you were to try and look at it as a what it is versus what it is, what it was versus what it is now, you could argue, certainly when considering the recent kind of non-update on controlled cannabinoids levels in CBD products, think that Oh, there. Where did that come from? I think that it's basically reaffirming their position because what really has changed? Nothing massively. The government know that there's a wider understanding of hemp. You know, they're going to have to allow for sensible guidance when it comes to growing because you know if I'm a farmer and you steal a bud, I'm supposed to report that. And then through me reporting that something's been stolen off my site, it shows that it's compromised, and then I'd lose my license. That's something that doesn't work for a crop that we can see is essential in many areas, you know, with the amount of end uses it has. So if you just allow a little bit more freedom where you can grow, knowing that really people will find out really quickly that it's hemp, it's not weed. People have become normalized. People will see that what's in their 10 pound baggie is not what's growing in that field over there. It's
But
simple.
but the sense
Um,
that a lot of people do want those flowers. We there are several online companies right now. I mean, I think you and I both know the proprietor of at least one of them, that are doing massive trade out here in the UK at the minute, and it's just they're living in their little legal loophole because when Taxman came knocking, they were told to pay 20%. They paid 20%. They still operate. It's
yeah.
and it's interesting. See, you mentioned Dave, oh, somebody comes along and steals this bud that's then going to have CBD in it rather than THC.
Oh,
Weren't you telling me about this thing on previous episodes of, the GW and the Home Office sending them effectively stolen weed to be tested for CBD content?
yeah. They were seized cannabis, and that was in 2004, just when it was reclassified as a Class C drug. Then again in 2008, where the report from the samples in 2004 and 2008 were used to justify the reclassification of cannabis again back to a Class B, basically on unfounded real public concerns around strong cannabis and skunk. Then you had 2014, which is interesting because Epidiolex was going through phase 2 and 3 trials from that point. And then in 2018, there was also a batch sent prior to the legalization of medicinal cannabis. Interesting times when they happen. And what they could or might be used for. Certainly, from my understanding, it was to catalog CBD levels in street cannabis. But equally, I know that the 2004 and 2008 batch were used by a Dr. David Potter. Some people, some of the right tinfoil hat people will know that name. But basically, he was in receipt of samples from the Home Office as well as Horta Farm. It's very interesting to know that Horta Farm were tied up in his research on these samples because he was doing a PhD in the phytopharmacology of plants. And basically, yeah, he was creating a database of strains, their cannabinoid profile, and their medicinal potential. Horta Farm, they had an office from 2004 to 2010 listed in the UK, which coincides with the research date for Dr. Potter's PhD. Past there, it's interesting because I can't find any direct tie to a sponsored PhD because Dr. David Potter's he was at King's College, but his PhD was sponsored by GW and arguably by the Home Office who are providing them, you know, with samples. But past 2014, 2018, all I've got is interesting placements in the timeline of the development of Epidiolex and certainly the progression towards a legalized medicinal cannabis framework, which of course was brought about with Epidiolex as its poster boy.
Yeah. My point really, I suppose, was that why are they not then going around and sampling fields? I know the study they argue is, oh, we were looking for air quotes street cannabis. What about field cannabis? Like even in their
Well,
own
the Home Office
yeah, their
does.
own documents. I mean, it's interesting here that I'll share this link below for people from the .gov website. They and again, it's all the fucking way that language works. So, hemp license burdens to be cut back to help grow UK economy is the headline. The capital hemp, H for the hemp, is capitalized because it's the start of the sentence. But they're using that as a small letter H because then later on, when they talk about it and they go hemp, they have to hemp because hemp doesn't exist because it's not licensed. You have cannabis licenses, low THC cannabis licenses. It says it across the top. Hemp is a colloquial term used out here by us lot, but when it comes to licensing and regulation, doesn't fucking exist. It's a linguistical trick that they've got for us to continually perpetuate that. Well, that's separate from cannabis, and then there's cannabis, and cannabis is only the bad thing in bedrooms and warehouses and clandestine grows, because there's all the medical things and they're good people, and then there's all the hemp and they're good people. But it's the same. Do you know what I mean? It's a further. It feels like again, just everything that they do towards the thing still further perpetuates that division of breaking down the groups, so that people have to feel, well, I want to make houses, so I've got to be hemp. I can't talk about that cannabis stuff. You know what I mean? Oh, I'm a CBD company. Oh, THC. No, no THC. Oh, I'm a medical patient. No, we don't smoke it. We can't grow it. We buy it and we vape it. La 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 la. Like you've got all these. It's like they pick these channels of progression and they try to mesh us through this fucking grate. You know what I mean? And put us through the fucking sausage machine to come out in the links that they want, that are just good little capitalist consumers under the system they're building. Because you're right, they are working towards something, but it isn't for our benefit.
No.
Like we're not going to participate meaningfully.
When was it provable though that it wasn't for? What's that white spot on me? Hold on.
Left arm.
There's a hole in
Hole.
my jumper.
Dun, dun,
Oh, it's got to be
dun.
one of these dogs. No, I just wonder, at what point did it become recognizable that this wasn't, something that would work for the populace? Because if we go back to how cannabis was used to kind of demonize societies and communities, well, something clearly wasn't right there, and yet that continued for quite some time. And yet, really, any politician should have just been able to say, look, call it what it is, you know, drug, plant, whatever. But you've also got to call it what it is, and that is you guys using it as a tool for intent. Whatever that intent is, that intent isn't for the public interest. Like, so, and if we look all the way back, because we've been talking, haven't we, about the 1925 Second International Opium Convention, like, which doesn't massively go into the public health aspect on why they're kind of demonizing cannabis. Like
Mm.
it refers to it, but for something like this is really dangerous. It needs to be reclassified. Blah blah blah. This is the reason. Blah blah. No, no, it's just basically cannabis is a poison and should be prohibited, except for when it comes to medicinal R&D, and that should be only for pure cannabis, which we know as isolates now. What was the intent? The skunk narrative in itself from 2005, when there was no skunk on the streets, and yet the government insisted that we call all cannabis above 14% skunk. Like, when have we seen the intent? Like, and I'm only asking because of the research I've been doing, and the areas that I've been looking. There has been many people, such as you and I, who have said, look, something clearly isn't right here, right? Most of the people have a vague understanding. There might be some variables between me and someone else, or you and someone else. There might be intricacies of words and the likes of, but when, it's all boiled down, something clearly isn't right. And yeah, I just wonder, because that then takes like the whole issue that's surrounding cannabis into that realm of well, it transcends politics, because we've seen both governments, Labour and Tory, just literally maintain a narrative. So whoever it's working for, it's beyond any kind of party political makeup. That intent exists in a higher place, and it's been dismissed. I mean, how do you kind of turn around to politicians or the political system and say, do you know what, we've seen that stuff isn't right. You know, people question why you say skunk when no one goes to their dealer and says, "Can I have a £10 bag of skunk, please?" You know, we see the samples that you were sending to GW to test for medicinal properties in cannabis, some of which would have been seized from people who were taking it for their medical conditions. You know, how do you kind of call out a point and say, look, you guys knew what the public interest was from that point, and yet you've
Well,
have
again,
stretched everything.
the pro I agree 100, and this is where this is where I become like almost a pariah in a lot some spaces. It's language. It's all just fucking tricks.
Mm,
So public, what we think public means and public interest means is, oh, it's what's good for me, and they're gonna give me treats, and it's gonna be lovely. No, no, the public purse is a euphemism. That isn't your purse. Do you think you can go government and go, you know all that money you got in your purse that you take from us, that's our money? Can I have a little bit back? No. No, it was a George Carlin, I think the comedian said that the function of government is to take the money from the poor to give to the rich. Like that's just what we're seeing. It is in the public interest, as in the British public, and the continuation of it, the death. We're in the empire's gone, people. The fucking Commonwealth is just an illusion paid lip service to a crown that is being crushed in most of those Commonwealth countries. And if it wasn't for various treaties, they would all be telling them to fuck off. And actually, if you look over the past, I think, 20 years, quite a lot of them have told them to fuck off, and many more will when the other one dies. But yeah, I digress. My point being that there's something in the way they interpret it. Remember, they're in again public service. Yet it's not. It's Orwellian language. You know, Orwell literally talks about this in 1984 of the Ministry of Peace, the Ministry of War. You know, the way in which you can change the public's perception and understanding of what the function of government and its elements are. So you hear that title and you see those people and they say these words and you go, "Oh, he's going to help us." But how many rooms have you and I been in where we've heard that, had that thing and gone, and gone, and then they go and do something completely different? Because that's the game of it. There's a Voltaire quote, the French fucking philosopher. Yes, I believe so. And the quote is politics nothing but the art of lying? That's all they are. That's what their boarding schools are for, rhetoric and debate and all of these things. Look, Boris admitted that Brexit was basically like, in Cameron and that were just, oh, it got out of control. It was just we were debating like in Eton sort of style, but they forgot about it. They were in them chambers and stuff, and they just created these narratives of, well, should we? I want to win this argument. Yeah, but should you win that argument? Well, no, but if I do, I'm better than him. Like it's just these ego pissing contests. And I think like we were talking about in the preamble, to go back to the 25 convention, the 1925 convention, I think basically what they started to see with the creation of the hypodermic needle, as we've previously off the record discussed, and the move towards standardization of powdered, synthesized or partially synthesized opioids derived from Somnera pavera, the opium poppy, and then the opium poppy became out of fashion. And then they started going really hard in places that, smoked opium. But opioids, and these were controlled drugs, like you said, 1906, the Pure Food and Poisons Act. And they started to then list these things, go, no, no, they're not poisons per se. The poisons, if you have them, these wonderful gentlemen in white coats, then it's a medicine. And I think after 10, 20 years of getting those patents down, and we started to see after the First World War with loads of those chemical companies that made fucking biological and chemical weapons for warfare, that suddenly became pharmaceutical companies, go figure. They then got together and basically kind of went, well, what else is out there? What other parts of nature can we profit from? That was one plant, and look what we fucking built. Look at the empire we're going to build out there. And they went, cannabis. How do we first get rid of it? What did we do to get rid of opium? Let's get rid of the opium first and then do the research. Because if we give it to them too long, it'll keep going. And they were kind of worried about almost the what became the 60s and whatever else, that cannabis getting out into the wild and people, freely consuming it and challenging the status quo that they'd worked so hard to socially engineer. And so I think that's just all we're living under, is that kind of century-long paradigm now, because it was 100 years ago. And then under the 30-year guise of the medicalization of cannabis document written by Doctor, now Professor, or whichever way around it is, Jeffrey Guy. there is a controlled narrative, and like I said, I think that the Brits or the elements of the institutional parts, the aristocracy, the fucking civil servants, the revolving door of politicians and CEOs, and the big, uh, what do we have? Is it we FTSE 500 we have? No, whatever our stock companies collective of it is. Their work is towards that end. That's the public interest. We'll make Britain the drug dealer like we were before through the Silk Road, like we were before through spices and everything else. We very quickly realized. I mean, look at Haiti. Haiti is still the most fucked country in the world. Absolutely decimated. We did that. We fucking did that for sugar cane. For fucking sugar, we did that. And then ever since, oh, that labour force, that labour. And then that gives us an idea to go, oh, where else can we go? Like, without falling into the history of Britain, like Jesus, people, like if you don't know, go to learn because love the people that make our country. Our history, though, fuck me, that's not a.
Well, they had the hardest job of all with the 1925 Act in it because there was still a lot of companies sorry countries that were part of the British Empire. Did they have full autonomy at the time? Not entirely certain, but certainly the ones that had left certainly still would have had a level of influence behind closed doors. Um, you know, and then when you think about hemp in itself, how it helped us rule the waves, create the empire that we once had. Like going to all of these places and saying, like, if you haven't got this plant, here you are, grow it. We want it for this, that, and the other. But if you have got this plant, then we want you to grow it to this standard so that we can come in for this, that, and the other. At one point, fiber, I mean, wasn't it close to its weight in gold? At
Yeah,
one
there was.
point before all of a sudden Russia started supplying the entire world
Is that like
with
Russia,
hemp
what became
fiber.
like Lithuania and that kind of region, Estonia? There was an exceptional amount, and that was partially part to the thing of the promotion of the plant and the competitive nature of the human spirit, the
So
human
Britain
spirit.
would
Yeah.
have had to change everyone's perception, even though they had already gone around the world saying this is the plant that we use for our ships and ropes and clothes and food and lighting oil and all those things that were applicable use back then. They would have to say, right, okay, and there's no more hemp. It's cannabis or marijuana or whatever the early plans were back in the day. I'm not quite certain I've seen in UK legislation a heavy use of marijuana as a word as certainly you do in the US. But whether it is or not, I think the race kind of baiting kind of angles kind of been slightly disproved now, isn't it? The fact of the matter is that word was used with intent, like skunk was. You
100%. That's
know,
exactly why we didn't really have it. We had a word that meant and had the same connotation. It was a vessel by which they could fill it with their
mm.
intention and what they want you to unpack. So when you hear that word, you're inculcated by that
But what we do
information.
know, certainly from the 1928 amendment to the Dangerous Drugs Act, which facilitated the intent, from the Second Convention, was that one of the reasons why cannabis was criminalized was because there was a concern of white women mixing with black men in the London underworld. I
Mm.
mean, how messed up can you get? But equally, you know what it's about, is trying to redefine and you murky the waters. And you can easily do that with racism because back then there was a large majority of people who were racist. Now it's a little bit harder to pull off because you can have a different color skin than me, but it doesn't really mean that you're more important, less important, able to run better, or whatever. You're a person. Right. So there's that, you demonize to the point that you get people to forget that cannabis is a food. Yeah,
But mate,
and you define it as drug or medicinal. As you said, if the person hasn't got a white coat on, then it's bad.
with
Uh,
that, yeah, well, that's exactly how they worked so well. This is what I was saying about the different approaches before. It's why I suppose you and I have had some of our more heated debates over the years over the word hemp. To me, it is a vessel to separate the industrial applications of cannabis and to then go, well, no, no, no. So then once that's out of the way, there is then only a drug. Whether that drug is medical is whether we tell you it is or not. And here's your magic piece of paper. If not, it's a dangerous drug. And so then the control paradigm is naturally baked into it. The food thing they'd already kind of separated us from is Trev Coleman. I'll shout him out for this because he says it all the fucking
Well,
time.
look,
The,
this is
the,
the
the,
thing.
the gruel thing. Like we have these historic references to of cannabis use as a food within our culture, but like I said, it's been censored and removed from it. So that now there is only basically, yeah, people hear two things. They go, oh, hemp. They're not thinking of cannabis in their head. They're not thinking stoners, druggies, baggies, bottle pipes, you know.
Well, that's it.
Wait,
No, no, because there's more people. I
sorry,
mean, you know,
in the
people.
normies mind, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, you know, at the end of the day, we have to kind of recognize history. And history does kind of specify hemp seed being used as a food as well as flour. You know, we know that cannabis as a word led to canvas, you know, which helped us rule the waves, but it's hemp thread that creates the canvas. So there is that kind of interchangeable aspect where
But
um,
the reason that if you want to go into the etymology of the words there, the reason for that is that the cannabis comes from cannabis with K from Latin, then goes through sort of the Greek and that kind of area, and then as it moves up into Central Europe, through Grimm's law, when it hits the sort of pre-Germanic areas, it gets converted from K to H's, and so that's where we get then all the divergence of Hanap, Henip, Hunup, all of them that break down in the Scandinavian regions up into Russia, etc., and then into the UK. We then have a compressing of the Saxon language and the pre-Germanic that became then modern English, and we compressed loads of defunct letters. I can't remember what it's called. Is it the A, the E? A is backwards, the E is connected, and something else, and we got rid of them in the English language. The word got compressed and made into hemp. Then, since Carl Linnaeus in 1752 unified them under the cultivars using Cannabis sativa L as the Latin name in the modern parlance and in legal documents, which is why then in your so-called hemp license, it is a low THC Cannabis sativa L license because they have to use the lawful name in it. They've just, in my opinion, utilized, as we spoke about the other day, the weaponization of language and the deliberate misuse, disuse, I don't know if disuse is a word, of certain nomenclature to create binary oppositions, whether people are conscious of them or not. That it's a huge thing we're seeing now with prescribed patients and their medical cannabis. Do you consume medical cannabis? Medical cannabis? It's like, no, you're prescribed cannabis. That isn't magic cannabis. It isn't any different. What you're doing is perpetuating their narrative, which is medical cannabis, capital M, capital C, making it a proper noun. So it's then defined under law as something different. And not only that, it then creates again another false division. So people go, oh, cannabis. Yeah, oh no, that's the hemp stuff. That's its cousin. And that doesn't get you high. And then there's medical stuff. Yeah, that's good though. That doesn't get you high either. That treats your medical conditions and gets you where you should be and you feel fine. But that street stuff, yeah, like makes you like psycho and you lose and you're whitey and you like, do you know what I mean? It breaks down the language when, again, in their rooms, in their private spaces, it is all cannabis sativa L. And they laugh at us. I imagine they must be perpetuating these things and fighting amongst ourselves. I'll hold my hand up. I was stuck in that trap for years, fucking bickering with anybody and everybody. Because it's true, but it's also a waste of time. It's a maze with no fucking end that they've designed for us to just get lost in while they build the world. And then eventually they'll come and just cut the hedge down and go, oh, here you go. And we'll go, yes, cannabis. And then we'll go and we'll realize, oh, we're not allowed to grow it. Oh, what do you mean I'm only allowed this much? What do you mean I'm not allowed there? What do you mean I have this? What do you mean you still this? What do you mean the laws that like we'll have the illusion, the simulation of a version of a future that we wanted, but it'll not feel right. It'll not taste right. It'll not settle right. And even if it takes us a couple of years to realize how they're fucking us over, to realize the freedoms that we've lost, there will come again another bunch of people who go, nah, fuck it. 'Cause that's what cannabis is, man. That's the reason they're seeking that control. That's their intent. Profit, social control. Whoa, best things in the world. Can we get all the money to enforce our version of what we want the world to look like? It's a win-win for them.
You just triggered Sprocket, by the way. You know, it's there literally. Obviously, why I had to put it down. You know, yeah. The word in weaponized deliberately or unintentionally. You know, because you have to think about that. You know, hemp and cannabis did coexist without a doubt. You know, is
Wait,
hemp
again, I'm going to argue no, because there would have then been sativa. like what we know as cannabis sativa under the subgenus of cannabis sativa L,
Oh, no, no,
as
no,
in
no.
long.
I mean historically,
Oh,
like the name hemp and the name
yeah,
cannabis both
yeah.
existed.
Yes,
Like,
as in not the English word of cannabis with a C, but yes, cannabis with a K existed, and the other derivatives that didn't follow Grimm's law and go into the H development of shit, then
you're right.
cannabis,
We should scrap that.
and there was, but if you look in the dictionary, it says, I don't know if it says defunct, but what is the word that it uses? You'll see in italics old and in italics something else, and that indicates that basically not it's been replaced by another word.
Yeah.
So then again in this document, the government thing, they when they talk about hemp without hemp, they're putting little h because then that's a colloquial understanding of the word, which is in the dictionary.
Hmm.
But again, the reason that you'll see it presented with a capital H in a dictionary is because it's the first fucking word in a sentence. It's like it's. I know I sound insane and semantics here, but it's entirely how the world has got where we are. Is that there are two different versions of English. The legalese interpret so the same words that you think, and when we talk them, you can't hear if it's capitalized or not. But they know the intent and the difference. Said that word, and oh, that was, and that oh, but that wasn't. But then it's mingled so that and they can say it. And this is why governments go, no, no, no. I know I said these exact words, but that's not what I meant. And then they give you this interpretation of that sentence, and you're like, wait, what? Like this, like I said with the Voltaire thing, man. They're just we're led by creative con men that are.
You've given me an idea. All right. I've told you this before, but there is a word that predates cannabis and hemp in the UK that is still used and recognized in the appropriate dictionary, and that is Kirich from ancient Welsh, Cywarch. And you know what? Cannabis, Kirich, hemp. Um, 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 uh, let's set up a petition after this, all right, and just say, look, cannabis and hemp is too confusing. Hemp at one point wasn't governed by whether it had more or less than 0.2% THC in,
I
it's a frustration that needs to be kind of unified. And the original word in the British Isles, or a original word in the British Isles that is still existing, right, needs to be reintroduced. So scratch cannabis, scratch hemp, everything is Kirich. And it's either low fat or high fat.
blue top or red top.
Yeah,
I think there is a movement that could be created for Wales for then a cultural thing for you to basically. It's a very interesting way to use certain elements that were provided in the devolution to the crowned kingdoms, that being Wales, Northern Ireland, and fucking blah, 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 Scotland. They weren't given drug law powers. This is something that Scotland and the UK have gone back and forth for the past several years about. They have, but they haven't. There's all bollocks to it, and they keep playing political football over it because they don't want to be blamed for perpetuating the same old problem. But I wonder if there is then a historic heritage kind of thing that you could go and argue semantics and, in a Welsh court with a Welsh judge and Welsh jurors and go, well, I haven't grown cannabis as is said by the Home Office, as is defined by this.
yeah.
We're Welsh here. This is what this is.
It'd be an interesting one. I mean, going into the history, there's a place named in documents called Abercyric, which is basically, sorry, Cumciric, right? I'll try that again. Kirich Grag, all right, which actually means stony hill of hemp, right? But where I was flipping a little bit is that actually it's in the same valley as Abercyric, which is basically like river, like so. There's a river hemp, but there's a place called River Hemp, right? And there's also a Glenkirich as well up the road from there that from the 1600s was supplying hemp to the Port Mad Dog. I'm Welsh, but I can't say these names properly. Port Mad Dog, shipping trade. But with Kirich Grag, right? That's named in documents from 1813 to 1820, 1113 to 1128. So how long does it take for a plant to become naturalized on a hill for the indigenous people to then turn around and say, do you know what? That's the Stony Hill of hemp, that is.
So there's
Basically,
yeah,
cannabis or kirich would have been growing in the UK naturally, you would assume from well before the 1000s.
I mean, yeah. So there's evidence to suggest Viking landing sites, cannabis seeds, and other sort of paraphernalia and related things. One of the things that has always been assumed is the Vikings brought it here. We don't know that. We also know that the Vikings, what was his name? Leif Erikson? Leif Erikson?
There
I
has
think it was
been,
Leif Erikson, and he was the in the New England in America. That was the landing sites dating back centuries before Columbus, and the
hmm,
Viking settlements that were up in is it Nova Scotia. My Canadian geography is terrible. Up in above New England, the disparate sort of islands and parts of it. Um, no, Toronto's on the other side. Yeah. And yeah, so I they could have got from one to brought to another. It could have been wherever else. I mean, you've then got to consider. I can't think how far long ago it was. Have you heard of Doggerland? I know that sounds
yeah,
dodgy to people in the UK that might have just heard a group sex act in car parks. But Doggerland was a mass that connected effectively us to Holland, Denmark, and there wasn't the North Sea really. There was land
well, it
bridges
is
as they
now.
call it. Well, yeah, they call it the like land bridges. I think is the geographical term to sort of describe it.
Yeah,
So
you're,
so
you're
so
touching
think
on the natural progression here. Now, going to the Vikings, while cannabis would have been in the British Isles before whatever word the Vikings brought over, but then they brought theirs over roughly at the time of the Angles and Saxons, like well, a little bit after them. But whatever their word is, I'm a little bit uncertain, but I have seen reports on the fact that there's been samples taken at all their colony sites, and they have been showing a high pollen content for cannabis. It's believed they were growing ruderalis. Some of the documents that I've seen, though, suggest that ruderalis was up to 2 meters tall, which is quite interesting because when you look at the classification of the plants, what is sativa, what is indica, and what is ruderalis. Ruderalis is the stunty little thing that you wouldn't get much, well, you would assume that you would get very little from. But then, you've got to consider that the global conditions at the time that they were going about were slightly different than they are today. And where a plant kind of struggles to survive, other places it thrives. So it's interesting, but Kirich actually has linguistic roots to ancient Breton, which backs up the potential of either cannabis coming in through the first Celtic migration or that it was a plant that they knew and found over here, which makes sense because then you've got the Dogger Bank angle. Now, according to other bits and pieces I've seen, there's a kind of recognition that the plant is over 30 million years old from somewhere in Tibet. All right.
I think it's
But
yeah
it's
they're very.
suggested, uh,
So I was just going to say, yeah, I think the paper is 28 million
28. I saw a paper
on
from
a
GW Pharmaceuticals research which suggested over 33 million years old.
I think it's basically the same rounding up of the same equation, as it were. But because
Yeah.
they both point to the same place, and
Hmm.
the concept of the wind spread theory makes the most sense of thing up high. It's dionysious, self-sexing, self-cycling. And it's just as it's come down, the cannabinoid levels have evolved differently because it has different requirements towards its environment. Humans then got involved quite fucking early. And the idea that
Oh,
no,
or did they? Because we're still on doggy land here, right? And we're also going on the timeline of the plant because in certain papers, possibly the two that we've suggested, there was an indication of a belief of cannabis migrating into Europe around about 6.4, 6.5 million years ago, but into China on the doorstep of Tibet, roughly about 1 to 1.5 million years ago. But that certainly, in essence, gives there a possibility of the plant already being there by the time that tribes had settled down in what we now know as the British Isles that is still above the sea.
I mean,
But then, of course, you've got the one final aspect, which is natural migration, and a bird just happened to, crap it out, and then on stage, on stage, on stage, and then all of a sudden,
I
um,
mean, yeah, with the whole thing of the animals love cannabis. Humans find water, like primitive humans watch animals. Where does the animal drink? I'll drink that water. What does the animal eat? I can eat that meat. I can eat that thing. Do you know what I mean? We learn through the mirror neuron, monkey see, monkey do. And I think it's absurd of us to not think that as we went through our phase of trying everything, especially being quite nomadic in like using up resources in a space and kind of moving forward, that we have to have tried new things and then seen a multitude of different mammals consuming these plants that I think that it will have been used as a food long before any other resource, and that they'll have kept the seeds because again it being diatomaceous, it's self-selecting, so you get a lot of males, you get a lot of pollen, a lot of seed, and then a few flowering bits because that's not necessarily what it's truly wanting. It's wanting to adapt and really take over that land. And if it's a prime spot, as it will have been when it naturalized somewhere and overgrew because it liked it, that'll have produced a good product, and then they've got, oh, and then when I've gone somewhere else, it's a strong, hearty genetic that's interbred with itself over generations. And then I think through their feces, through other fucking animals' feces, through like undigested bits, through just dropping all the other, they're just, because again, think how many thousands of seeds can come off a single plant. Like, and these bulky things you're talking about, again, like ruderalis and the thing of it, until Linnaeus, like, and they're being brought into like Cannabis and the related family of hops and those kind of things, there will have been completely different tribal names for things in dialects long lost because of global colonization, probably because of things like the British Empire or the Mongols or various other individual groups that, sought global dominance and succeeded to lesser and certain degrees. Uh, and then I think that as we've come towards this knowledge of it, I mean, it's still not even settling. We settle now today on those sub three genus, but the Soviets. That's some real fucking interesting stuff that they were working on. I think at one point there's something that I read fucking years ago, and I'm hoping it's still on the internet 'cause I don't really think I saved it, about a discourse between two Soviet scientists arguing whether it's 11 or whether it's 13 cultivars, like subgenus, that produced in the different variety, because the cultivars that they were analyzing showed subtle but different enough. And you still see this in a lot of the older heads, and then talking about like drug type, and we've ended up with like of India, which is what indica means, but then that ascribed to shorter, stockier drug type, which is more Afghanica. Like it's same with all of this stuff. It gets so messy because they don't want us to organize it. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that we see certain bits that then allow it out to us because then over time it supports their fucking narrative. But I honestly think that early humans have interacted with this the same as other things, and like you said, other animals have interacted and consumed these things. And if cannabis is that old, I mean, shit, how long ago was Pangea? Like,
oh, yeah, yeah, that might be going a little bit too far back
but
there.
yeah, but you know what I mean? I don't mean in
Yeah,
terms of actual, but like what we then know is just is estimates and models. Even like Pangea as a concept, through studying of tectonic plates and tectonic movements over time, this is extrapolated data that then is retrospectively analyzed through the limitations of the perspective of the individuals at the time. Like, I'm not then shitting on all science. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just saying, like, it to me is there is reasonable doubt of what we think of like we know about Doggerland now. We didn't always know about this. We didn't know about like how India is crashing up and created the fucking the Tibetan plateau and the like Hindu Valley mountains and stuff like that. Like we're shit is moving and ever fluctuating and doing all its own thing, but cannabis seems so adaptive. Like you said, then if these early people, like thousands of years ago, that they were using what we now believe to be ruderalis, like I said, why is then ruderalis shrank? Is it that because it's in its natural environment where it is a landrace in that space, its environment has dwindled to the point it can't produce its best?
but this is where you got to kind of have a kind of a case study to
Mm.
kind of consider, and there is one specifically with Australian bastard cannabis. Uh,
Mhm.
now, that was apparently discovered in the 70s or 80s, I believe. It's specialized to grow in the Blue Mountains in the northern part of Australia. How did it get there? Now, it's believed that the Brits were the ones who introduced hemp or cannabis to Australia, but then there is a kind of consideration of recent revelations in regards to what people were trading with what people. You know, it seems the Aborigines weren't completely isolated. So, you know, before the Brits came over. Then, of course, you've got Polynesian movement, which kind of verifies that to a point. But when you're looking north, Malaysia and into China and India, well, there's a good chance of that. And in fact, I think there was something I saw recently that indicated the potential of ancient Egyptian trade with the Aborigines. But then, of course, there is that mummy that's soaked in cocaine and tobacco,
I was just about to say this,
which
like the
raises a lot of questions. So, yeah, when did it get over there? Well, you know, if it was given to the Aborigines, there doesn't seem to be any kind of evidence of them using it. Equally, if they dropped a seed going for a walk through the Blue Mountains, how did that plant evolve into some shrub? Because it is a shrub, and certainly, like you know, it's got little pear leaves as opposed to what we're all kind of visually used to, and basically, it's adapted to be something else where it could well be defined as a subspecies, certainly. Now, it is just that question of how did it get there? How long would it have needed to go from what we recognize as the cannabis plant, regardless of ruderalis, you know, indica or sativa, to such a unique morphology while still being defined as cannabis?
yeah, it's I think it starts to raise some interesting points about this concept of like land races, heirlooms, things like this that we can trace back the lineage, like we were just discussing in that research, to effectively a parental cultivar or series of cultivars that then left that area through whatever means arrived in certain other areas, and over a period of time in those climates, they it's like it's epigenetics as we know in the study of like in of humans that your parents sperm and egg boom slap together, you've then got a coding, certain things on, certain things off, all of these things as a code together make up who you are when you're born. You then have environmental switches that then turn on or off these things. You can then engage in things that will then turn on and off these things and give you like a predisposition towards this, or then something that you have a lockout of this. It's incredibly interesting field of study. The same thing then I believe is true of these plants, that then if you force them into a certain environment, or they end up in this environment where these things are turned up but these things are turned down, what's it going to do? We see it with humans, how adaptive humans are. Darwin speaks of this in the Origin of Species. Is it? Yes, Origin of Species. And he's saying like that adaptability. If anything else, the things that are here now got their shit together when they needed to and got in the game. Not that's not me actually quoting Darwin, obviously.
Are
That's
you
my brain
aware of
interpretation.
irreducible evolution or irreducible complexity?
Conceptually, not academically.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's probably good that you laid that distinction because academically, no, but it is something that I've been looking at, and certainly in regards to the Darwinian tree of life.
Mm,
It's the concept of where cannabis became quite important. Now, the irreducible complexity angle. If you were to take a bombardier beetle, sorry, and look at how it is able to spray any kind of wannabe kind of prey animal to, you know, get away from safety. It basically has a chamber. Well, it has three chambers. It's almost like a rocket. It is what it is. One small chamber produces one compound. The other produces, I think, an oxidizer. They get mixed into another chamber just by its bum, and then basically this hot bubbling mixture of compounds comes out, scares off anything that's trying to eat it. Now, how did something that complex evolve into that? I mean, I think you could argue with humans, really, the kind of bits and pieces that have evolved, there could be a sequence to it. But certainly with them, you know, they would have had to have been eaten to a point where, something triggered for these bits and pieces to be made, but they couldn't have been made independently because either they wouldn't work or they could ultimately just kill the bug whilst it was just minding its own business.
But
Something doesn't make sense there. So when you look at the Darwinian tree of life, something gets me. We got hydras and lobsters that have endocannabinoid systems. So where did they get their cannabinoids from? It just so it turns out, I think it was 2006 or 2009, there was actually a report put out about a fisherman who had found an undersea species of cannabis sativa, right? Which is interesting. You just wonder if it's like
what?
um, yeah, mate, do check it out. If you
What?
don't find it, I do have the link somewhere else, right? And I'll try and dig it out for
Yeah,
you.
please do.
But yeah, so and it is an interesting thought, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, to have an endocannabinoid system suggests that you need to have endocannabinoids, and we can make some, but sometimes our systems become depleted. We know that there are sources, so you would assume for anything to have it, it would have evolved near some sources. Like so when people say that we've evolved with the plant, I kind of start thinking that maybe it's something that evolved with the plant, and then we just basically took over.
But
Because
yeah, and that's what I think again speaks to this earliest. If you almost go with an Occam's razor kind of approach, off through my Occam's razor because your Occam's razor is fucking different because the information you've got reduces down differently. Absurdity. Anyway, my point is that yeah, it's a common ancestor, earliest point. Like there is something in the fact that these are both right-handed molecules that are almost identical, but one is exogenous, one is endogenous, one is produced in a species that we broke from so fucking far ago. Plants. We're just not plants. The common ancestors back is so far back, it's not even funny. Like, do you know what I mean? So it's either we're talking like, whoa, and we're even way off with 28, 33 million, whatever. Um,
so would you say,
or it's
right?
sorry, go on.
Would you say it's fair to say that we've been given the endocannabinoid system as a result of evolution through multiple animal types?
Yeah, I believe so again, because we are then the not end result because we're in motion, as it were. But us being the intellectual species that we are, that allows us to have the perception, the illusion of separation from nature. When we look at other nature, and we go to mammals, and we just look at all the others, and their endocannabinoid system that really fucking baffles us, like you says, there is a lot of common ancestry. The ocean then bound thing. Again, goes back to, well, it was all fucking water. Our other common ancestors, when we start to go back again to find the next point of convergence, we're all fucking cephalopody little tiny thing, and then you go back like this. So where then is the concept of like cannabinoids? Is this like, forget cannabis or anything else, of like this mechanism? Is it so vital within the machinery of biology for the complexity of life to continue? Then it becomes a question of what the fuck is prohibition then, if not effectively an attempt to stop that evolution, to break the cycle of not just one species, because our global fight with it, our eradication has removed this from everything else, from rabbits, deer eating it, from fucking, we've seen like big cats, wild cats in countries that consume it. You know, the synergistic relationship that it had with fungal networks through mycelial pathways, etc. Like removing cannabis from nature and then nature's fucked. It's funny that. Like, I know there's
Well,
obviously
there's another angle to this, actually. If you look in a biblical context, right? I forget what part of the Bible is like, and I give you all herb bearing seeds to eat, and they shall be like meat. Now, going by the creation story, God made us and then made animals, right? You know,
Hmm.
so there's a lot of endocannabinoid systems going out. And I wonder, you know, despite what I said earlier, there could be a few people out there who will say, we developed to this through natural process, or did we? I mean, that's the thing. If we were created, then again, we've been given the endocannabinoid system, only not this time through evolution. And obviously, with the fact that the ECS is there prevalent in a lot of animals, it kind of, I don't know, possibly even uh, is a little extra kind of plus point for intelligent design because,
It's almost like a signature. It's found on the things that then do. We actually, because I don't know. Again, there is. You'll probably know this story, and I can't relate it to what period in history, but it's the thing of like measuring the British Isles. That if we measure the British Isles at a scale of a meter, it is so big. If we measure it at the scale of a centimeter, it is so big. If we measure it, so by breaking it, instead of it just being here's the UK with 75 sides, here's it with the 10 trillion sides or whatever, the size of that total area is fucking enormous. Like it, oh, I've lost how that relates to the other point.
are you measuring at low or high tide?
Well, again, still more complexities here. I'm trying to figure out why was I going on to that. That relates to whatever I was just saying. Um,
It's kind of breaking things down, isn't it? Because like
oh
if
yeah,
you're
sorry.
measuring at a
It's the
meter, then
idea
you
of
can't get all of the crannies and all
yeah.
of that, and then
But it's the idea that then the more we look at something, the more we find. It's that fractal, informational fractals in that sense that you then learn that information and breaks and oh shit, more and breaks and you go just constant layers of information that all relate into the thing to the larger thing that we just can't understand. And I think when we look at these things, we've got all this, yes, and then we filled in all this stuff, then we find something and go, ah fuck like Graham Hancock, like in the work that he's done, and he's forced academics, and then things come out and go, actually, yeah, I mean, when I was a bairn, I think we were 100,000 years old. We're now 350,000 years old, I think is the earliest estimation of like the human civilization or actions of the collective tribe and whatever else. And it's completely breaking down the 10,000 year thing where we
well, yeah,
agriculture and all the
if it's
rest of it.
biblical,
It's
we're only 12,000 years, but then certainly when you kind of go back into the other realm of like science, which was basically developed to understand how God or gods do it. I don't know if you know about the Pythagoras school. That's what that was all about. But going into that realm, is it really only that much? One of the things that I find fascinating is when you look at Machu Picchu and places like that, where you've got the seamless, well, you can see the seam where rocks have been joined, but you can't get a razor blade through there. And yet we can't do that now, let alone lift some of the blocks that are being put into place at that time. So is there a forgotten technology that used to be prevalent in the world, but then kind of restricted or lost through ice ages, the likes of
oh,
I don't know. In that sense, I think we're actually a little bit older than some scientists think. But then, science isn't solid. It's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be an opinion based on available facts at the time. It's like medical knowledge. When you go to their schools, I think you're told that you need to be prepared for 70% of your knowledge being obsolete within 10 years. That's pretty much the same with a lot of sciences. But Hancock, I mean, it's good that he's been banging the drum and and trying to smash a narrative that certainly does raise questions because we can look at the Sphinx and the pyramid, and they're certainly more than 2,500 years old. I'd say a lot more than 4,500 years ago. I've kind of mentioned religion and the likes of. To my understanding, it's not even mentioned in the Bible. The Jewish were, allegedly used as slaves to help build things, and yet actually it's not mentioned in uh, Judean manuscripts in
mhm.
kind of any way. So when was it built.
Yeah.
And if it's not
Yeah.
mentioned in the Bible, we're supposed to go to 12,000 years. Well, is are they older than that?
Mm. Well, I mean,
Uh,
it's again, it's interesting. So the ancient, the kind of the thought now of Egyptologists and others, as they uncover more and more around the site, and then they kind of hit a wall because you take look at a picture and you go, oh, the pyramids in that vast desert. 3 inches behind you is Cairo. Like it's fucking there. Like
yeah.
that's ancient Egypt is under all of that shit. And so they've gone, oh, we've got this little bit around it, and we'll look around it. And they built these sites of reverence and they built up these things. I mean, they now discovered obviously the idea of where they had all these channels and canals and vast systems. They're now finding homes and everything else that these spaces that are like this doesn't kind of fit with certain narratives. I mean, I think one of the technologies, if you want to call it such a thing, that was lost was human will. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe it is my socialist inclinations and my community spirited and minded individual self as opposed to being individualistic. I believe that at some point humans just became dicks when we got too much stuff, just too much stuff. One guy went, "I want the extra," because prior to that there was enough stuff. There was more than enough stuff, and then some dick went along one day and went, "I want your stuff. What are you gonna do about it? I'm bigger than you." Like I know that's the primal thing of like monkeys, like in that the monkey kingdom and whatever else. We can observe that behavior, and we have, and that helped form things in like psychoanalytics and modern psychiatry, etc., and modern anthropology. But I still just feel like there's something special about our intellect and the us through the industrial revolutions and shit and prior revolutions that we have no concept of that brought us things like we talk about like the Copper Age, the Bronze Age, the da 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 da. They're just stand-ins for a period of time where we found one or two things that don't fit in with the other one or two things that we found.
How far off the beaten track are we going today, bro?
Well, this is I'm enjoying this. This is it still relates to it in a way because what we're talking about is like the uncertainty of science and how things change over time and how in our lifetime the perception of things have changed. So I think it does relate to our original point, even if we have sort of deviated slightly.
Yeah,
Um, but as we were talking about in ancient Egypt, there's a fucking mummy with cocaine. Like
yeah.
we can't fit that into our model. That doesn't make sense to us. Coca, indigenous over there. All that water, and we didn't have no boats apparently. Just bullshit, but official record versus cultural records and accounts that are, documented from African tribes or whatever. But we're not allowed to talk about
Well,
them.
let me just check this a second. What was it? Was it? Wasn't it? Check out the Gosford glyphs. Right, Gosford for anyone who's watching. All right, also known as Carryong hieroglyphs are a group of approximately 300 Egyptian-style hieroglyphs located in Australia. Um, you know, I mean, they look quite Egyptian-y to me, completely against the kind of throwback of Aboriginal art. So, I just, that in itself is well, carved 4,500 years ago. Isn't that when the pyramids were supposed to be built by the
Uh,
mainstream narrative?
I mean, again, the whole thing of pyramids. I mean, there's fucking pyramids everywhere, man, and they keep finding more in South America. Was they use more lidar attached to drones and other
Do,
technology? They're like, we're finding things that don't fit with things,
do you
but
know
they're
the
there.
country that's got the most amount of pyramids of them all?
Gonna guess something obscure like Chile.
Wrong continent, Sudan. And they've got a
Yeah.
different kind of pyramid as well. They're
Is
a
it
little bit more
is it the
pointy
block
and,
step?
and smaller on the base, and they tend to have doors you can kind of walk in, and they've got a few thousand, I think. But they're not on the scale of like Giza or any of the
Mhm.
kind of. other ones around the world. But yeah, thousands and
Wow. Yeah, man. It's
easier to
just
build though, I think, by average Joe blogs.
we did this.
Even us skinny armed people with potential beer bellies would be able to kind of contribute to kind of sorting them out.
I mean, this is the thing again. We are pattern recognition creatures. That's one of the things that has helped us adapt, survive, and evolve. So we see patterns in one way. Another way to then look at this is literally, well, a triangle in nature and in math is the strongest, quickest shape to develop in terms of the way that the energy dissipates around it. To then build upon this in terms of the shapes of hexagrams, etc. And we've learned that through then programming and building imagery and computing, etc. But that quite early on, when man goes, well, doof, doof, doof. Ah, do you know what I mean? You think of like, what is it they called the was it Michelangelo? It was one of the Italians, and is the bridge that is pivots, and you just literally wedge one piece in, then you wedge another piece in, another piece, and it then just self-sustains because it puts the
All
weight
right.
into the
Yeah.
angles in like a hexagon. Um, the thing of like us building spirals. Spiral is then like a really primal sort of shape. So you see these native spirals. We've got them. Some of the oldest ones. They're over 5,000 years old in Northumberland, just up the road from me. So you carved things, and there's something in certain archetypal shapes that we've been drawn to over time that I think then regardless of contact between other tribes, other peoples, we've then sort of used them as the foundation of things. I mean, there's the work of, is it Rupert Sheldrake? He has a theory of morphic resonance that they did studies with blackbirds, and they were studying these blackbirds pecking on bottles of milk. And so big problem in certain areas, and they wanted to observe the thing a bit, and so they put out certain bottles in a controlled experiment with the birds, and kind of went, well, which ones are they going to prefer? They then very quickly discerned gold top is cream, thick. So they ignored the other colours, they ignored the other thing, they went straight for that. What was weird is they were working with international partners, and within weeks the behavior was observed in other regions that had perchance happened to have, because it was a long period of time ago, for plastic bottles, gold top milks, that then other crows would then pick up on this behavior. Yet there was no way that they could observe that these creatures could have switched spaces. And so they extrapolated from this an idea, and it kind of makes sense. We talk about like the 5% rule or the 100th monkey paradigm, which is you get 100 monkeys to do something in a space, and then all the monkeys see it, and the behavior becomes infinitely greater. The scientific version of this that they created was about crystals. The formulation of a new crystal structure, the first time of a new formulation, takes an incredible amount of energy, incredible amount to do. Over time, that gets easier that there's something in it that the replicating behavior is intrinsic to things. And then they've observed this, like I said, in behavioral traits of animals that have no disparate like connections that they can see without going back millennia, like millions of years back, that doesn't make any sense in terms of built behaviors, even though we're starting to understand like genetic memory, blood memory, muscle memory, like these things that the body holds these things, and then from the cells they hold memory, water holds memory. Like there's something that we are connected that we're not connected. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think even the narrative that we needed to, oh, here you go, mate, here's this. Like if a plant appeared and we went, oh, and some of us went, oh, others are going to be drawn to it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
That there is something there in that behavior, in that reciprocity, in that transcends all of this other things that sounds pseudoscientific, I think, still, but seems to make sense from what they're understanding, and it makes
Now
sense in
you
like
say morphic resonance there, like some would say that that's an argument on how the blocks at some of these ancient sites were actually not just lifted, but able to be molded into shape so that you couldn't pass a razor blade through. So it's kind of
even
interesting
sound.
that you say that. And yeah, yeah, because you've got acoustic levitation. Like, have you ever seen any of that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. With
Like
the
it's quite interesting, but then at what point can you directionalize that frequency? Possibly even use it as a crane, maybe. I mean, I don't know. I did tube resonance at degree level, but the idea of shifting a chunk of stone and then altering its form to make it seamlessly fit into a weird kind of shape, that's a little bit beyond me. I'd
Um,
rather stick in the world of calling out
w-
people over the dodgy
ha
cannabis legislation.
there's something again to relate us back to this that I had a very interesting conversation with uh well, yeah, sort of a contact, an acquaintance of mine, that moves back and forth doing various things in different countries. And he told me, well, I'm going to keep it loose enough because I'm not going to mention him or the company, of a company that was working on technology to petrify concrete, to petrify cannabis industrial materials. We had a conversation back and forth, and sort of a story or a narrative sort of emerged from this of like, what if, like, if cannabis, these light little blocks that then over time are literally breathing, as it were, per se, they are draining then carbon from them. They get heavier over time. The material changes over a longer enough period of time. Were some of these blocks, I mean, I know that we can break different things when you see the actual chemical composition of them, but some things that we look at of structures, is it becomes fully carbonized over time? Again, I don't know the science of this. If we're going back fucking far enough, you see wood turning into rock, like, you know what I mean? We
Petrified. Yeah, but that's normally under extreme conditions, isn't it? Is that something that happens slowly in certain environments?
But this is what I'm wondering is that we look at tribes around the world that then use plants plus mud to make huts. What if some of those plants were then cannabis? Again, I'm way out the realm of science here, people. I'm just theorizing some shit.
We're some realm.
We're in here somewhere. I'm just curious because it's something that I have wondered of that plants then become different, like the way that the things change and modulate over time, like a long enough fucking period of time.
Careful here, Simpa. They
Uh,
change like what? Taking a plant and then using it in an industrial setting and calling it something completely different from the plant.
I'm just saying that, like, yeah, the we're connected with plants. It's because of plants that we're fucking here. There are studies that keep coming out that wind up a lot of the carnivores, and they're going, actually, prehistoric man ate very little meat. We didn't get into farming practices of animals until much later on. The earth was effectively a garden until we sort of started monocropping. Um, but no, I think there's something too that we were in the garden with all the plants, and then if it is the biblical story of eating the apple of and gaining the tree, the knowledge of the tree, the knowledge from the tree of life, um,
The
and then we
knowledge of good and evil
yeah, and then we were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and then we've started eating each other since, and that's what I was speaking about before. About I have a belief, a feeling. It's not really something substantial. It's in terms of people have faith in various things. There's just something in me that I believe some point in our history, we just turned on each other, man. Whether we got too many of us, whether, like I said, my belief is that there's too many resources and somebody kind of went, well, not too many, but there's such abundance that somebody went, nah, I got this. And then they suddenly figure, well, oh, you haven't got some? I'll give you this if you do this for us. It's like Ricky Gervais in that movie, The Invention of Lying. I just feel like there's some point in history where somebody just figured out, I can fuck over the other guys. And it's just built on there ever since.
uh, yeah. Oh, I think that's conflict has been eternal, hasn't it? Like
Has it though? I mean, glimpses of it, yes, but you watch like a gazelle and a lion drink water at the same watering hole. It's not until that lion gets hungry that gazelle has to worry, and it doesn't.
yeah.
The
Equally, you
lion
have the
doesn't
same with
mass
the
kill the gazelles.
equally you have the same with the fish that swim into the mouth of the sharks to kind of like give them a little bit of dental work, knowing full well that they're not going to get chomped down. But equally, they'll know that somewhere around the corner there is a fish who doesn't want his teeth cleaned, not just yet anyway, and certainly wants to chomp down. And that antelope will always know that to the left of him is or right wherever it is a lion that could be saying hello with its teeth round its neck in the next 5 minutes after it's had a drink.
But
Uh,
that's the balance of life, man. I can live with that. That you know the thing, but it doesn't stop you doing the thing.
But then
It,
if
it,
the resources dwindle, then there's always going to be conflict, and there
yep,
won't be that truce. And
100%. And
that's
that's
why
what,
you've had tribe against tribe, country against country. I mean, it'd be interesting if there was, at what point is recorded history recognized versus right here, right now? Has there ever been a day on Earth whereas there has not been someone trying to unalive someone else? You got to use that word, isn't it? I've noticed it being
yeah.
used. Algorithm, unalived. Don't say
I'm gonna say murder. I'm gonna say genocide. I'm gonna say kill.
voider.
I am unmonetizable, so fuck you, Alphabet. Whatever. Might give me a warning. Probably won't.
Making money
Hopefully it
from
doesn't.
I've not had that
Mm.
notification, although admittedly, yeah, I haven't done a Hemp Hound TV for a bit.
Yeah, you
Just
won't
like
because of the word. You ain't going to be monetizable because you've got the word hemp in there. It's such bollocks. But to sort
and
of
yeah,
to
it's not the dirty words that look, it's a little bit bizarre, isn't it? Although I do know back in the day, the CTA when they formed, they had to go to the bank and register. Well, they were registered as the Hemp Trades Association, but trading as the Cannabis Trades Association because no one had given them a bank account with that name.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. It's part of that game that then to me is to round up our previous point, an end evolution of whatever gameplay was going on sort of historically. And I think that the issue is humans, at some point, like I said, saw nature as a resource rather than as a reservoir, as a paradise. And we, rather than being stewards and guardians and using our intellect to ensure that yes, we are going to be taking more from that everything else. That means everything else gets fucked. We need to find a way to compensate for that, whatever structures they may be. But whatever we've been laboring under since the first, well, yeah, first industrial revolution and steam and all the rest of it, has not been to guard, to be a good gardener, to be a good tender to the earth. And I think cannabis, as you and I see it, the unrestrained, ubiquitous reseeding of the world could do a lot to undo that. And I think it is then this war of that speaks to what you were talking about before of the evolution that it is this thing. You were in an environment, you reproduce as fast as you fucking can. It's coded with the dangers. Boom, you get squashed. That thing's a quarter of an inch closer. Then this goes, and this goes, and over a long enough time scale, yeah, things just become things. It's weird what the hell is related and what stays stagnant. Like a crocodile, 100 and something million years old. No need to evolve. Some jellyfish, I think, are fucking older than that. Like they just picked a thing that form works in their environment and they just have gone with it. Whereas then so many other things are so much more recent because of is evidence to, as you and I were suggesting there, that the changing environment. And then we had a great stabilization period. But then if you're looking at Graham Hancock's work, I'm just rounding everything that we've just said, by the way. The upper Dryas impacts, sort of 12,000, 13,000 years ago, and then the resetting of sort of history and knowledge. We are rediscovering the knowledge of cannabis. And I think it was far more prevalent in ancient history. I think it was far more prevalent around the world, used as a resource, if not accepted and known as a medicine or a drug. Like, I think even before sort of concepts of that, when we were still just, it was homeopathy kind of approaches and botany. You know, it was long before we thought of these things as drugs or narcotics. It was this plant, stop that. Do you know what I mean? We weren't quantifying it in medicine until potentially, as history states, maybe the Greeks or whatever, when they started to create the concepts of what we now know as medicine, pharmacopoeia, etc.
Being
Um,
utilized 12,000 BC, identified as a food in 6,000 BC, and first identified as a medicine or recorded as a medicine approximately 3,200 BC.
yeah.
All of that was in China, and India was basically 1,000 years behind them in that process and that
But
level of discovery. But food first, medicine second,
but again, this is Hippocrates. Yeah, it was Hippocrates who said, "Let food be thy medicine."
and medicine be thy food.
And so I
Yeah.
think what that speaks to is prior to then us going, oh, food isn't medicine, medicine is medicine. Like they didn't call the medicine food. So when they were taking that, you ate the food was the medicine. You didn't, you know what I mean? If you felt ill, here, eat this thing. They didn't think of it as then going, oh, problem, diagnose, medicine. So I think it's almost the understanding of the concepts in modern
Yeah.
errors, ERAS, that that retrospectively, when we look at it, yeah, the medicine appears at this point, this appears at this point, and this appears at this point, because that's when we either sort of had an understanding evolved. I mean, you've got to think that we're not altogether that long out of sort of nature worship. If you go back to the Celtics and shit like that, if you go back beyond the Abrahamic religions and Jainism and that kind of thing, well, even Jain, they were kind of like, yeah, there was either ancestral or na nature worship, which is prior to deity worship.
You hold on a second. Let me just check I've got the right one. Um, oh, there's hemp seed sauce. That's it. All right. Prince of Transylvania cookbook, 16th century. All right. And this is kind of a bit of an echo of the you know, let food be thy medicine and medicine be by thy food. Yeah, hemp seed sauce. Where is it? It is effective. I've seen it. A mentally ill young man was treated with this by the doctor of the Polish king. Um, that was for this is sorry, I should have read that sentence first. For this dish is not only good for the stomach, but also for the brain. All right. So yeah, it is effective. I've seen it. A mentally ill young man was treated with this by a doctor of the Polish king, and then that's rounded up with don't add too much vinegar. But it kind of shows that it's more than just a curative food because in the 12th century there's two documents in the UK, one that shows that the seed is used and the other that the flower is used for a potion to heal wounds. Now one's from the Priory of Sion, the other one is from a Welsh monastery that whose name escapes me right now, and both of them, yeah, it's a potion, but what do you do with a potion? You drink it. It's an ingestible thing, not designed to kill you, but certainly it gives you, shall we say, building blocks for your body to kind of heal those wounds. But apparently, it's good for the brain as well, and that's the hemp seed.
Well, this is the interesting thing, because again, they're hemp seed in that era until the enforcement and the creation of prohibition in the fucking 1900s, like as in international legislation that then was enforced upon nations. Um, the cultivars weren't settled the way that they were fucking settled. There's 13, correct me if I'm wrong, is it still 13? Approved European hemp strains for industrial use.
Oh, no, no, there's a lot more than
Is it
that.
increased?
You've got, I was just going through them the other day. I think there's at least, in fact, there might have been that many in 1997,
It's been a
right?
long time
Or at least
since I've
between
looked at that.
93 and 97. But beyond there,
Not
you've
that
kind
long.
of got, your Finola Mark II and, all of the different strains have been augmented. You've got like 4 or 5 versions of Compulti that are on the list. It's easily 80 to 120, I'd say. But, equally, some of them are just variants of you know,
Yeah.
older ones.
But yeah, but a point before then, those kind of being the things, and they're the things that now pervade, and even still in, like you said, in different climates, you'll get what the term in America, hot hemp, which is always funny to me when they hear that. You get your hot hemp, more my hemp's hot. It's like, oh, okay.
Makes me want to drool. Hot hemp.
But yeah,
Oh,
but their seeding is not. It's not how nature works. You can't go. That seed is. It'll go to 2% and no further. It can't. It's like, oh, it won't go past that. No, of course it fucking can. They've in certain environments, in certain testing, to pass the regulations, we can en masse produce this and sell this because we could say on average or whatever the percentage of the outcome being, a quorum decided that that means that that equals that. Like, but yeah, my point being that before any of this shit it was just cannabis wherever it was. And so, yeah, they'll have just raised and been to what it'll have been. how well they'll have cleaned them. I doubt they'll use like hydrochloride, what the hell's bleach? Hydro,
H,
no, the fucking the chemical name, the hydroxy, fucking.
hydrogen chloride.
There you go. Thank you. Um,
I
too
got
many.
C in chemistry. Woo.
Took too many chemistry terms in my brain there. Got confused. So basically, yeah, how well that they're fucking cleaning it, how well that they're preparing it from the
Mm.
thing. So there's always, I mean, you see this in, as we've talked about years ago, in hemp seed oil in UK, in international markets and in UK, like good hemp and those, and the variants of content of cannabinoids, etc. Um, so I think that, yeah, again, it's not been identified as medicinal because it's so much more subtle and it's not standardized. If cannabis acted like opium, I think it would have been identified in medicinal realm a lot sooner. Like as in
Do you want
this,
the perfect? I've got a story for you here about Finola. Have you heard of that strain?
yeah, I've got some seeds of it in with some modified seeds of it from somebody in the
Do,
UK.
do, do you know who developed that strain?
Not I'm cultivar, not strain. I hate strain, but
Well,
yes.
there's two Finnish doctors.
Mm.
They enlisted the help of David Watson. Ah, Skunkman Sam himself. He went to Russia and obtained two ruderalis, brought them back, and basically used them as the foundation for Finola. But there is a website that I've come across where he contributes regularly on the genetic kind of stability and makeup of certain strains. It's almost like a catalogue of what he's got specific to his name, right? And Finola appears. Now you've got like a species galaxy chart, a bar chart, right? Which just basically says this is made up of this cross this or this amount of genetics of this and blah 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 blah, right? What's interesting is on the side he provides six, I think it is, right? There's ruderalis, a CBD strain. It's a little bit vague on that front, but then you've got skunk and you've got OG Kush, right? What's interesting is when you look at the bar chart, skunk's not in there. So it's a question of why has skunk been brought out? But what is in there is OG Kush. And
Mm.
it's like, hold on, OG Kush in Finola, right? So it's supposedly a ruderalis autoflowering angle, but it does have sativa genetics, but it also has indica genetics, right?
Mm.
So then all of a sudden, what is it? It is kind of more focused as a ruderalis, but then that's misdescribed on the EU approved strains list, which is supposed to be for cannabis sativa up to 0.3% now, I think it is, because they just literally got that extra zero point 0.1. But then, going back to what you were saying, it doesn't describe exactly what it is. But then, because you have those genetics in there, is it still hemp? Well, we know it's hemp if it's used in some formats,
But
but it's cannabis.
but again, that's what the wonderful thing of the little trick is that yeah, when in regulation, capital H hemp under their definition, yeah, it's hemp. But then what we're trying to say if then hemp, then if that was a variety, the meaning that, so it's the dilution of the language. I mean, it makes sense because the best what they're now putting out the market is CBD cultivar cannabis rather than hemp. Like what they've done is again the same thing. They're taking high THC plants or what we would consider to be indica sativa, regular full fat as it were, blue top, and breeding them into this to it put in the qualities of the beneficial qualities while reducing the THC content but increasing CBD content. So they're getting quite high CBD contents while keeping the THC naturally quite low now. And it speaks to something that we were talking of before of the if you almost then think of it as a dilution that maybe cannabis in its perfect form sat up there in the peninsula all those millennia ago. And then as it broke down, it had to turn off different things we were talking about through epigenetics, etc. And then through each area it's settled, and then it's perfected this and it's perfected this, and someone like I'm a skunk man is coming around and going, oh, put this with this, and it's finding the best, and rebuilding, reconstituting cannabis, giving it the best. So it's like you've managed to spend your life, but somehow you split yourself and you went and became an academic and learned for 40 years, but you were also an athlete for 40 years, but you were also like a politician, influencer. You've got to live all these lives and then get put back in at the end of it and function. That's it, that maybe that is kind of the future of cannabis, and a lot of these breeders that are now moving into proprietary techniques and properties and what do they call them, patents and owning intellectual property are seeking to do that by these breeding methods, whatever they're seeking, they can lawfully define it as not cannabis, not whatever.
Hmm.
Like there's always been, like I said, the narrative of then, well, skunk is this plus this plus this plus this, according to then there's that narrative, there's then this myth, there's then that. There's then the cultivar of the whole thing of how a vague GWR with what is Epidiolex, the cultivar that then creates that.
Oh, it's M250.
So then again, where these are coming from, the same research and development. So it then feels like what happens with the hot samples. So say if you were in your
Oh, they
intellectual
got a
property
controlled
and then
setup,
you got
mate.
Finola out and they went out to every European country that could grow and then you got the samples back because they're too hot. Actually, they're doing your research for you on these. And again, to me, it feels like we live in a live
It's
laboratory, whether it be through
it's funny you
prescriptions or
should say
whatever
that,
else,
mate.
that they're building that intellectual properties from 50, 100 years. Their grandkids, they'll own all the, it'll be so, we'll forget, we'll lose the idea of it being plants.
It's
We're
funny you
just,
should say that because I've had a little bit of a back and forth with Sam Skunkman recently, who has decided I don't know what I'm talking about. However, this was in regards to whether or not GW had patented or placed plant breeders' rights on skunk number one. Now he says they haven't patented it, but I've come across a document that shows in 2001 that GW registered plant readers' rights for something. Now, what it is, I don't know, but equally, Sam Skunkman don't know. To his response when after he said, you don't know what you're on about, and I said, well, any idea what they registered then? He said, no, I don't know, and I don't care because at the end of the day, I was just ensuring my funding for my R&D. Okay, but has people actually been checking out what he's done? Some people will say he's a brilliant scientist, a mad scientist, but equally, he has angles. He developed skunk number one in the 70s. He launched the International Hemp Association in the mid to late 90s, and he's worked with the British government and others, as well as his R&D in medicinal. So he's covering every single angle. One of the things that he wants to do, or is doing right now, is breeding plants that only express one cannabinoid. Now, if they express one cannabinoid, it means that there would be plant breeders' rights for, whether the license is, like the strain is licensed or brought outright by GW. But they do have access to all of these bits and pieces. So you've got like the seeds that are kind of floated in the recreational arena being consumed. There'd be a level of feedback. Equally, back in the day, there was also the samples of seized cannabis, a lot of which would have been the strains developed by Skunkman Sam, because let's be honest, it weren't just skunk, it was also Northern Lights, Hindu Kush, and quite a few other strains, So there's a little bit of a research project there which we discussed earlier. But equally, he's going about on the research of the hemp as well, because you and I both really know in the grand scheme of things, THC is not the be all and end all of cannabis. It's nice. But equally, there are other goodies in the plant, and by goodies, it's not necessarily something that gets you stoned. But the guy is effectively ripping the plant apart. I mean, as highlighted earlier, we got OG Kush in genetics in a strain of hemp that is grown massively around the world. And it kind of raises this kind of silly kind of line of as you say, it kind of needs to be standardized in language. It shouldn't be selective nomenclature. Right, it's and that's why at the end of this, conversation, I will be launching that petition, calling for Kirich to be standardized. Drop cannabis and hemp. It's Kirich, low fat, high fat, mid fat. Who cares? Kirich Fred, medicinal Kirich, recreational Kirich. It's tidier.
I'm back in it because at this point, as long as we had consensus, as long as it was something that when we point to it, they point to it, we talk about it, it's defined as the same thing. But my understanding of how they've fractured the world through linguistics, through contracts, both oral and written, we're still just children playing in the sandbox.
There's one last curveball on this, mate. Have you ever heard of Cannabis giganticum?
Giganticum.
Yes.
Not off the top of my head, no.
It's in a lot of cookbooks from the Roman days. Apicius is also an interesting one because it mentions cannabis. It's like the affluent Roman launched in 500 AD. Cannabis is listed as an ingredient, but sorry. But in modern translations, it doesn't seem to be identified as what dish it's supposed to be going in. But certainly there are other kind of names outside, and that's like separated from indica at a point because it was still used up until recently, and by recently I mean within the last couple of hundred years. There's many different names for the plant, and some could argue, being devil's advocate, that some of these bits and pieces, that the issues with nomenclature are kind of something that happened along the day, and as we've got to our present day, it's been something that's been weaponized. As we have kind of seen, there is more than just Kirich, hemp, cannabis indica, sativa, ruderalis, Australian bastard. The names out there go well beyond what we see, if you've got an English speaking world, and by English I mean business world, because most of the business world does focus in English, then there is a need to kind of standardize bits and pieces, and it is unfortunate that we've had to get to a point where it's necessary, but it's messy. But it is more so necessary than just with the consideration of hemp and cannabis. At some point, Cannabis giganticum wasn't kind of used. In fact, I saw Peter Reynolds put up something about it recently. I did find it listed in a couple of medieval cookbooks, but then there were also other bits and pieces that suggested many formats beyond there as distinct ingredients.
Hmm. I mean,
Essentially, I don't think we know half of the stuff the plant was used for because of that missing knowledge, that misunderstanding, of the name, in multiple geographical locations. And after all, it grows on every continent apart from Antarctica.
give it time. If we keep going, that'll be the last bit of land humans will have in the centuries to come.
Yeah, a little bit of global warming.
Uh,
Thaw out that little 2 meter patch, just drop a couple of seeds in and come back at the end of the polar summer.
I mean, who knows, man? There could be that if humans were, I don't know, in whatever reality, complete hypotheticals to cause no fucking arguments with science or beliefs here for any fucking body, that if then snow not there anymore, man gets access to land, man goes, oh look, there was cannabis here already. Like, do you know what I mean? There's something in me that kind of feels like that the only reason we don't know it's there is because you can't fucking touch the thing. The bits you're touching are mountains. How dense the ice sheets are on that continent.
Come on, you've had your tinfoil hat on today, sir, and you're all you're going to say is that there's nothing in Antarctica. It's just ice. Really?
I,
Is that where you're
I don't
ending
know.
that?
I don't. Again, from my understanding of how the Earth works on a 23-degree broken axis, through its oscillation, through space, through the way that the lunar cycles, the solar cycles, all of that works, that's always going to be cold for the period that we've lived in this vast bit. As we're moving into the thing where we get and we warp slightly closer because of the axes, that's going to fucking warm. Like it's going to change. We're going to get access to that land again, is what I'm trying to say. What is on that land? I don't have a fucking clue. We could end up finding fucking Egyptian style pyramids and a sphinx and weed and
Um,
cocaine and then go, what?
Hold on a second.
What was on there?
Yeah, the
What was it?
lost pictures of Scott of the Antarctic. There was a few things seen. Um, I'll have to find it for you, mate. But you just look what the pyramids. I think there is one.
Again, as we were saying before,
An Egyptian-y looking stuff like, well, why not just for good measure?
that's what I'm saying is that we, it's not. It seems like science became the global religion, and it's heresy to speak against it. But science was formed against religion almost. It was going, oh yeah, you're saying fucking Helios dragging the sun across the fucking sky, and then Copernicus or whoever's like, fucking, I don't know, like there's this thing and that, and maybe it's you're out.
Is it
The next
religion
guy
or is
comes.
it policing? Because that's what I've seen in the industry. Is it's like you can throw any amount of evidence to prove a point at someone, but if they've got kind of accreditation behind their name, all they have to say is something like, "Oh, it's anecdotal." Like, but I've got
Conspiratorial.
two
Da, da,
reports
da.
from someone who's got interest in this, and because they've done it in such a way, it shows a level of validity, thus kind of providing a level of authority in this situation, despite the big pile of papers you got here that show whatever.
Yeah, well, again, it's that thing of not to poo-poo our culture currently globally, and it's not to say that previous cultures were any better. We get to different points in different answers through different things, and because of then the adapted evolution of humans and intellect and whatever else, and the handing down of knowledge and information, oral and written, etc., and the acceleration of technological advancement as we're on that curve, of just like infinite growth, in the idea of eventually of enough technology will create the paradigm that we could take over the universe if humans are to live long enough. I think that's it's something to do with Fermi. It's not Fermi's paradox because that's why the aliens think there's something of a law, somebody's law from that group of thinkers that came up with the idea that no, well, maybe the civilizations everywhere that do that, but nothing can get past. In order to get to that thing would take the probability of that happening becomes ever more infinite the more growth there is. Do you know what I mean? That it becomes infinitely more complex, and this the society will collapse. And I
I
think, yeah,
did, you know,
we're just manifest and we know what we know now and we've got what we know now. But if you were 500 years ago, you had your complete knowledge of what was. There wasn't any gaps. People, I wonder what that was. You had a story. Your story was it was a god. That was science. Or it was this, or like, in Greece, fucking, was it Socrates? No, it's Aristotle. One of them, Socrates or Aristotle, and said that objects fucking fall, not because of gravity, because they didn't quantify gravity. They said because objects basically lose interest. Their maths just kind of, and they get bored. Like, because that's the narrative they had, and everyone went, "That's fucking genius, son," because that was the best
can I
explanation they
just
had.
can I just put a disclaimer out? Like, obviously, because I'm not certain how much we got left, but equally, I would happily encourage this conversation. So, uh, this is merely a roll up, because I'm allegedly a sensible person, although some would hear the words roll up and say, no, you're not, Jones. However, so I really think, there's a call here, potentially, like me, you, a couple of topics as suggested by some people that we may or may not know about, but definitely outside of cannabis.
I would be interested. I do enjoy our deviations, and I did have a momentary worry there when you said about going to give sort of a warning there. I was just like, wait, because what we've done here is gone. Here's all this interesting work that you're doing, and it's factual, and we're talking about all the ways that it could be undermined, and then we're going, oh, conspiracy's doing that. Like the
Well,
juxtaposition
yeah,
of the things, but
what?
what we're talking about in that doesn't stand as a representation of the work that you're doing, obviously, which is very well researched and documented. You know what I mean? You're very fastidious with getting your details, your sources, and everything together. So, yeah, I
Well,
hope nobody misconstrues my going off the rails here and talking about the insane things that I may or may not think about, affecting your vision or opinion of Kevin here.
at the end of the day, there's been all the kind of turn around and say, look, here's an opinion, and there's evidence to back that up versus hearsay. I mean, some of these bits and pieces we've been talking about, I've referred to interesting potential documents, but equally, it's a little bit harder to say this is this and that is that. I won't lie. I've had a couple of people turn around and say, "Oh, you're sprouting conspiracy theories here, Kev." But when I ask them to kind of point out what they think is the conspiracy or the theory, they often turn around and say, "Oh, we've got no time for conspiracy theories to discuss them." And it's like, well, you've got enough time to jump on my post and say this is a conspiracy theory. Now you can't tell me why it's a conspiracy theory because you haven't got enough time to talk about
I
conspiracy
mean, it,
theories.
it it is. This is the thing of again why the CIA was so fucking smart when they created and popularized the term conspiracy theory in the time after JFK's assassination. Um, is what is a conspiracy theory when you break it down? It is a theory that some people conspired to do something. If you don't have that confirmed, then yes, it's a theory. Otherwise, then it's just lobbying or an act of parliament or it's just business. Do you know what I
Mm.
mean? But then when it's a disproved thing, you have a theory that these people conspired. So it's in that sense it's literal, but then they've managed to dirty the word with Bigfoot and aliens and fucking flat earth and all the other fucking things. That then when you go, I think you people have conspired, and they go in the correct parlance, that's a conspiracy theory, and people go, idiots, aliens, you think the earth's flat. Like, do you know what I mean? It's they've managed to do that so much that when we do point to things and go, well, yes, it is in law a conspiracy. We theorize that this is, and we want to means test this by getting the evidence from you because you won't put us in a court of law to be able to do it. So it's just another linguistical fucking nightmare that they've got us spinning on. But
Yeah,
it's
but the
no
thing
less a
is,
reason to do it, but like, it's
yeah,
still
I
mental.
look at Brexit. You could see that the government wanted Brexit to happen because,
Yeah.
there was your Brexiteer versus your Ramona. But the thing is, like, that's quite harsh because it was just splitting things down the line into a manageable context. Anyone who literally, like for me, for example, I saw benefits for staying in, I saw benefits for getting out, but that's not allowed. You've got to be one or the other. It's like with the jab, were you pro or anti? Because those who were anti, like, scum of the earth. Those who were pro, it doesn't matter if it didn't stop you from getting COVID and didn't stop you from transmitting it. Like, you were the sensible ones. It's very easy to kind of play people off, isn't it? I think, and just by turning around and saying conspiracy theory, well, if you do think that's the case, then I feel that you should be able to turn around and say the reason why I believe it's a conspiracy theory is because of A, B, C, D. Like, and in a sensible context as well, because when I'm talking about what I'm doing, it's very hard sometimes to bring about all of the evidence that I have for a certain point into one nice kind of little kit and cabundle, like, or whatever it is. It's pretty much a case of, well, this happened, and what you need to know is that that happened after, this happened before, and then you need to know that this person and that person and whatnot, and it's you're trying to force someone through a jigsaw puzzle, and they
It's
can't quite see the picture, and and laying it out properly, that's hard. But if someone turns around and says, "No, mate, your picture isn't right," and they're not prepared to at least kind of point, to the bit that's missing or out of place or that should be there that obviously was dropped,
Mhm.
that kind of does my head in, because I think either you're just plainly disrespectful, um, or you're there to poo-poo someone, possibly because they're saying something that is right, or possibly because they're saying something that's a little bit too close to the mark and could potentially disrupt your interests. Me, be perfectly honest. I I'm not a fan of calling people out. I'm more a fan of kind of getting to the truth. And kind of understanding why cannabis is where it is. Equally, I know that's going to upset a few people. And if they're turning around to someone and saying, discredit Kev, try and make him look like a little bit of an idiot. I can kind of get that. Um, you know, there's only been one person. We have discussed him, but I think I don't think his name really needs to be dropped.
Mhm.
If it were to be dropped, then certainly I think it should be through an article. But he's not the only one. I have had it where I've shared a post in a cannabis focus group, and literally I just go, "You're wrong, and you're wrong on everything," and then I'm blocked by the person to be able to ask why I've what I'm wrong on.
Well, this is brilliant evidence towards exactly what it is. So, when somebody in the realm of social media now, people that still care, the vast majority of us are just scrolling, not interacting. Few people actually still interact in the spaces, but a lot of eyes go past, is what I'm saying. The people that then do, what are their intention? Let's look at this as we were talking about before, with the drugs and whatever else. You're either commenting because you think that that's good and you agree. You're either commenting because you think they're wrong and you want to provide something and you go, why are you wrong? Or you're commenting that they're wrong without any grounds, which is then either they're commenting from a point of ignorance, as in, I don't believe your thing, but I've got nothing to back it up. It's a feeling, or like you said, they're motivated by other factors. There are a lot of people working in the space in the UK, Europe, and just the global cannabis space that are diametrically opposed to others, that sit together, dine together, travel together, laugh together, take their selfies together, but they're working to undermine each other. They're working to try to force the collective narrative that will emerge from this, the air quotes truth that will come from this, to be medical or industrial or international, local, da da da, extract, isolate, whole plant, da da. There's all these vested interested of groups and all just smiling assassins. Hey, nice. And I was in that circuit for years. And it made me ill. Like it just going out of those spaces of just feeling like, I want it off me. I want it off. Like it was sticky, thick, minging, like, ugh, like running through treacle of just the unspoken stuff, the facade, the performance of it all. And just being like, you people, like, what is, you're just sniffing each other's farts. Like, what is going on here? You're giving each other, while prodding and probing and taking that information from each other to use against each other. It's just such a soulless space. No offense to anybody still operating in there. I'm speaking as the unit as a whole. I'm not trying to call anybody out within it. That's my experience of it. Is those that survive longer than 5 fucking minutes and go, well, this, no, I want a genuine business and actually do something with a plan. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get involved in this mess. Like
Well,
it's
the people that I'm aware of, not just kind of with me, but with other people, have all been from the medicinal arena. And that's not to say that it's full of um, people with agendas and interests to satisfy, because there are people in that space that do want to make a difference, but equally don't want to tread on the toes of various industries to do it. But those in that area, who have agendas to protect, well, they've got a little bit more resources than the food companies or the farmer who's just growing for fiber. Or say, for example, one man bands like you and I.
Mm.
They can dedicate time where our time is precious, and we have agendas to bust that they may or may not be a part of. I mean, for example, the one that I was talking about, I actually wondered, and again, I'm not going to say name. I'm not even going to say the name of the company that they work for. But I've been calling out the Tiger Report, which, we kind of vaguely touched on earlier when it comes to hemp farming and THC levels. That was supposed to, responsibility in certain aspects was supposed to be devolved to DEFRA and the MHRA, dependent on what dynamic of the consumed plant we were looking at. But yeah, the Tiger Report basically outlines creating a two-tier medicinal market: tier number one for GW, number two for everyone else. But by everyone else, I mean everyone squeezed out of novel foods, except for the preferred partners, your Canare, your Purists, and whatnot. And then it just basically becomes a little bit more controllable by the government. And if a company was part of the founding opinion that led to the creation of the Tiger Report, was targeting me, like, which has occurred, then I would kind of understand why they wouldn't turn around and engage me on the conspiracy theories that I am supposedly venting. It is basically someone protecting their pile. I know what their pile is. That's just rather unfortunate for them, of course.
Yeah, again, it yeah, people just running in different directions, as it were. That it feels that the reason we don't have the consensus is that there is vested interest that doesn't want that consensus, and I
It
think
wants the whole plant in a certain dynamic, but the problem there is that we already know the plant was a food before a medicine. But then, of course, it don't matter if you restrict it as a food in favor for it being a medicine, because any restrictions is going to have impacts on what can be grown and processed in the UK. We're talking about outdoor growing. It's unfortunate the farmers are still put in a position where they need to destroy the control parts of the plant. We were talking about the potential of indoor growing, but with indoor growing and hydro, you would expect that they'd be growing for more than fiber, as you kind of indicated in previous conversations. But they'll need a different license. They'll need more security, and certainly there will be very few people allowed through that door because too many.
preferred partners, maybe.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
we were talking about that same announcement. Also, it doesn't change much for this year, but starting the grow season 2026, licenses go up from 3 years to six.
It is handy for the farmer.
So that helps the pre-established. Yes, the new people get a year of deference, so you could get a license now and not have to grow till next year's grow season to establish yourself, which previously you didn't. You had to be basically growing to get the license in that kind of weird paradox of things that you needed to basically be at producing to have the license, which is actually that's the whole Timothy. That's a whole nother branch of things. I was going to say that's the whole Timothy Leary thing of how America changed it with the paradox of being able to present the product to get the stamp to get the approval, but needing the product. But yeah, it's as we've discussed quite in depth and when we've not been discussing other things. Um, there is wherever there is interest, there will go the attention and the actions of the interested parties. And then wherever those interests collide with others, they will naturally conspire to better those interests. There's a wonderful theory. There's a wonderful film with Russell Crowe, Beautiful Mind, which is about a mathematician, bollocks, whose name has just jumped out of my brain, who comes up with an idea of like game theory. In the film, it's presented beautifully in two examples. So he discovered it by observing pigeons and the way they go after food. But then he's in a bar. There's some lass in a red dress, and she's got I think four mates with her, and there's him and his four mates. And they're all going, "Oh my God, this lassie in the red dress," and she's like amplified by the visual effects, etc., as being above the others. And they're all going, "Oh man," and they're starting to compete with each other and going, "Who's going to get to buy her a drink?" And so from the five, one would get one, and then they were all sort of going, "Well, then the friends wouldn't want to be rejected." So Russell Crowe's character, this mathematician, was explaining his game theory concept of what if none of us go for the girl in the red dress? I think actually the math I gave you before was wrong. That there was more friends, maybe, so that each one of them would have theoretically a person that they could go and talk to and attempt to court. Um, and so he convinced them and he spoke of like, well, if all of us go after the person in the red dress one by one, we'll take our shot. None of us might get through. That's 100% failure rate for all of us. You then try to go to a friend's. You've just publicly tried to get with a mate that you think is prettier than her, telling her all these things. You're then going to turn around and try and hit on this girl. The success rate of that again is lowered. And so then he spoke with them, what if none of us go for this and use the 100% of the efforts and energies to go for, as he determined it, the lower targets. It's a horribly misogynistic analogy now I really think of it. But in terms of a visual analogy, I mean, it works really, really well to when you see it in the film. And I think it's a similar sort of thing that is happening here, that all these people of their interest, they publicly are like disagreeing and jostling because that's what the game requires. But their reward requires them to work together but not be seen to work together. That's the illusion of competition that exists in capitalism with like fucking seven, eight companies owning all of the food supply chain, like with Unilever and companies like that, Nestle, etc. Owning what they do is they have the illusion of going into the company, the shelf, and you go, "Oh, look at these chocolate bars," and they're competing for shelf space, but they're not. Whatever you choose, if you buy chocolate, you are rewarding them. They're trying to build a cannabis industry that is all the illusion of choice, and it's all this thing out here. And yeah, we're jibing. Those executives are all in the same parties. They're flying to the same expos around the world. Like I said, that even if they are like faking it, and but they're still pally pally. They're still going to form connections and then reciprocate toward their needs.
Anyway, dude, I'm gonna have to wrap this up.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, we've gone on quite extensively there. I appreciate your time as always. No doubt, as our soon-to-be official correspondent, we'll get you a little badge.
Excellent, excellent.
Um,
Fridge magnet badge, please.
nice, nice. We'll get that sorted in the post here. Good. We give prizes here on the Simple Life. Um,
We should try a conspiracy theory one on the side, mate. See what the general kind of feel is.
Yeah, man, I'd quite like to do more stuff with yourself that isn't cannabis because we do end up not having to, but again, the nature of what we both do, where
Hmm.
our interests meet is good content, so we try and focus on that, even though we do delve into the other subject matter. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think to
admittedly,
just to
the,
just
the only
think on
thing
it,
missing from earlier was the aliens did it.
I was literally at one point gonna go aliens, bro. Like, yeah, it's good shit. It's good shit. No, I think Connor as well. I'm actually coincidentally wearing Canaman t-shirt. He does some conspiracy theory like standalone episodes with other people as well. I think yeah, we'll do it and then just like start a series and bring in like other people and create a round table and just bring your craziest conspiracy to the table, folks, and let's talk this shit out.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. I like that, man. I like that.
All right,
Definitely.
sweet. Where can people keep up with things that you're currently making public? Obviously, you're doing a lot of work that isn't public.
Yeah, they can keep an eye on LinkedIn. That's my main channel at the moment, but I also do now use Blue Sky for the Hemp Hound agency, and of course through the website www.hemphound.co.uk. Or if there's anything that they could possibly think that I might be interested in, maybe a little juiciness on the cannabis story, or they just kind of want to ask who provides decent hemp and CBD products in the industry, you can contact me at Jones. I forgot my name there. It's Kevin spelt like that there, Cefyn Jones at hemppound.co.uk.
Awesome, awesome. I'll include links below. Yeah, very much enjoyed this. No doubt we'll catch you before the end of the year because more shit is yet to transpire and more things are going to the public arena. So I look forward to yeah
You're
catching up
joking. I'm
with you again
expecting another
soon.
3 times on the show this year, mate.
I was being conservative. I was being conservative, but yeah, you want to get those
Ooh,
numbers up to
ooh,
10, get your fridge magnet.
conservative. Oh, oh.
Small C conservative. That someone's gonna clip that. Jesus Christ. Tim is a conservative. Ah, fuck my life. All right. On that bombshell, I will let you go and I'll catch up with you soon, brother.
Take care, man.
All right, peace and love, man.
Peace.
All the best. Bye. Well, there you go, folks. That was Cefyn Jones. Yeah, hope you enjoyed that one. Really good to catch up with him. Kind of ended up slightly disjointed with the conversation there. I think it all rounded up in the end. I think we surmised enough of it, even if we did go off on several tangents. I think all somewhat relevant, if not in some way conspiratorial in nature. I think there seems to be a growing theme amongst my episodes recently of just an interest in exploring the conspiratorial, the kind of esoteric, the kind of potential, the hypothetical, the theoretical. It's a lot, I guess, easier to process and to discuss than the state of our current reality. And the reality very much remained the same that it has for quite a few years. We have these token gestures. We have sort of two steps forward, one step forward, two steps back. We have regulatory double speak. We have. Kind of this astroturfing of communities that we can seem to be going on within sort of the medical space. Again, this is not me directly accusing anybody. There just seems to be becoming a fortification of a narrative that is oppositional to the legacy culture that ultimately has given the industry the foundation that it has, and the plateau that it is now shouting down from, rather than lifting up the people that built that system, that allowed them, that sacrificed, that still sacrifice for them to have what they have. The fractured nature of the fight is very, very difficult to deal with. It's hard to process when you've been in this quite a long time, as in the juxtaposition in your motivation internally to continue to fight versus your awareness of what the reality of the situation is. Yet, nevertheless, we choose to crawl towards the fire. We choose to continue to move towards our belief that ubiquitous deregulation, ubiquitous descheduling and the removing and decriminalization of all cannabis related offences would usher in a better reality. It just would. I can't see how it wouldn't. It would take the shackles off industry. It would take the shackles off research and development. It would take the shackles off legal restrictions around talking about apoptosis with cancer and cannabis cells. It would take the shackles off all of the research around children with epilepsy. It would then just allow people to produce a plant, a resource, whether they choose to use it as a food or otherwise, at home, to be self-sufficient, to cultivate their own individual relationship with cannabis. It's the future I want to fight for. It's the future I know Kevin's fighting for. I know it's the future that many out there are fighting for. To use that old analogy that we keep talking about the train, like there are some passengers on that don't want you to get to your destination. That's terrifying because you're sat with them right now. And I don't know how they plan on derailing this train, but yeah, man, we're seeing it. We're seeing, as always, the drawing of lines of allegiances, the creating of in groups and out groups within the space, and it's quite hard to navigate because there is then, as there is with all of these things, a sense of supremacy within each group. The hemp people think they're right, the medical people think they're right, the CBD people think they're right, the rec people think they're right, the fucking legacy people think they're right. Because in a way we all are. But the right thing is when all of our rights go together and they're in a big old ball of right. That's the thing that we should be aiming for. Yeah, for some reason we're lobbying for our interests against others' interests, which ironically isn't in the interest of anybody. It was long term. It's short term gains. It's stop the paranoia that's induced by the prohibition. It's to allow access to vitally needed medicine without guilt or moral, worry or issue. I understand the reasons why people choose the sides they choose, and I don't begrudge them necessarily. I just wish that we could, as we spoke of there, basically the subtext of the whole of that we could find that consensus, whatever it may be, whose ever truth it is, or whatever truth it may be. Without that foundation, how can we move forward together? I can't see how. So that's why I'm indulging a lot of conspiracies, I guess, at the minute, because it's more fun for my brain to deal with rather than standing here or sitting here like I was going to say the pulpit, like proselytizing, fucking evangelicalizing. I've done that for years, and I feel like I don't want to repeat myself with all of the things and the catchphrases and the articulations and the formations of language that I have that are in repetition of these things. I want to find other ways, more creative ways, I guess, to draw analogies, parallels of other things that can help people see the larger picture. That it's not just you and your need, it's the others in the same boat. If you need cannabis, if cannabis is somehow of a benefit to you, I feel you're obligated, duty bound, that if you were going to fight for your right, you have to fight for others. Like, I don't know, maybe that's just the way I'm wired and that's wrong. I don't fucking know. It's the way I'm motivated in life, and that's the world I want to fight for. So who knows? Who knows? I'm getting too sort of philosophical here. My jaw hurts from talking too much, and yeah, I need to get this edited and turned out because it's Monday and this is going out today. Yeah, talk about giving myself extra work. All right, this has been a pleasure. And as always, appreciate you guys turning up and listening, enjoying this podcast. It's probably been quite a long one. I've lost track. We started at 12, but then we were talking for like an hour before we even started recording, so I don't know how long this has actually been. But yeah, if you stuck around the whole thing, really appreciate you. You're a trooper, and yeah, gold star. Gold star. Appreciate you. Yeah, please do. If you've enjoyed this, give us a like, a share, a thumbs up, whatever it is you do on your platform to show appreciation. I appreciate it and you further than sticking around with the gold star, extra gold star. If you really enjoyed this, for a third gold star, check us out on patreon.com/the Simpa Life, where you can, for less than a cup of coffee a month, help me keep the lights on this little project. Check us out on all social media. I say all social media, like Meta, as in Facebook, and Instagram is where we generally are kicking about these days, and thesimpalife.com as well. We'll be back next week with, I don't know, somebody. You'll love it. It'll be great. All right, take it easy, folks. Peace and love. I like pushed my air out instead of bringing it in. That didn't help.
It's just the breathing episode,
Yeah.
exercises before like
Oh.
launches.
Yeah, because normally I take a big breath in to go, yo, how's it going, folks? But I breathed my air out there for some reason. That was so weird. Okay, composure.